The massive chamber floated in space, its crystal walls reflecting the light of 1,000 stars. Inside, representatives from across the galaxy gathered for what they thought would be a simple meeting. Ambassador Tae-ho Kim stood at the speaker's platform, his gray hair and tired eyes showing the weight of his many years serving Earth. He looked up at the towering figures around him and felt small, but he did not feel afraid. High Magistrate Vilren clicked his mandibles together, a sound that echoed through the chamber. The insectoid leader was 3 times Taeho's height, his exoskeleton gleaming under the lights. Around him sat dozens of other species, some reptilian, some gaseous, some mechanical. They all looked down at the human with barely hidden contempt. "Ambassador Kim," Vilren's voice boomed through translation devices. "Your presence here is noted. State your concern and be brief. We have important matters to discuss." Taeho took a deep breath. Beside him, Commander Yuna Park stood in her military uniform, her face expressionless but her eyes sharp. She had warned him this would not go well. She had been right about many things lately. "Magistrate honored council members," Taeho began. "I come with urgent news. The Vashir Empire has attacked 3 human colonies in the border regions. Thousands are dead. We have evidence they plan more attacks. I ask this council to intervene and stop this aggression before it escalates." A wave of clicking, hissing, and electronic sounds rippled through the chamber. It took Taeho a moment to realize they were laughing. Vilren leaned forward. "Ambassador, the Vashir Empire is one of our most respected members. They have maintained order in their region for 3,000 years. Your species has been in space for barely 100. Perhaps your colonies were in restricted space." "They were not," Yuna spoke up, her voice steady. "We have documented coordinates and timestamps. The attacks were unprovoked." An old reptilian delegate named Elder Cormeth raised his clawed hand. His scales were dull with age, and his eyes held a sadness that seemed older than time itself. "Magistrate, if I may, I have reviewed the humans' claims. There is merit to their concern. More importantly, I have studied their species. I must warn this council." "Warn us?" Vilren interrupted. "Of what? These primitives who still use chemical propulsion? Who barely understand quantum mechanics?" Cormeth's voice grew stronger. "I have accessed their historical databases. Magistrate, these beings have fought over 500 major wars on their home planet alone. They have survived ice ages, plagues, and nuclear weapons. Exactly," another council member cut in. "They fight among themselves. They are divided and weak. The Vashir have technologies these humans cannot comprehend." Taeho felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "Elder Cormeth is correct. We have a violent history. We do not hide from it. But that history taught us lessons. It taught us how to survive. It taught us that when we are threatened, we do not give up. We do not surrender. We fight until we win or until there is nothing left." Vilren's mandibles clicked again, this time in clear amusement. "How very primitive. Ambassador, the galaxy operates on civilized principles. War is conducted with honor, with rules, with limitations. Your passionate speeches mean nothing against superior technology and training." Yuna stepped forward. "With respect, Magistrate, you do not understand. Humans do not fight with honor when survival is at stake. We fight to win. We will use any method, any weapon, any tactic. We have records of our ancestors fighting with sharpened sticks and rocks. We have records of them poisoning water supplies and burning entire cities. We evolved as persistence hunters. We chase our prey until it collapses from exhaustion. This is not a threat. This is a warning." The chamber erupted in noise. Several delegates made gestures of dismissal. Others simply ignored the humans and began talking among themselves. Elder Cormeth tried again. "Please listen to them. I have seen their entertainment media. They fantasize about extinction-level threats and last stands. They tell stories about sacrificing everything for victory. This is not normal behavior among spacefaring species. Most of us evolved past such extremes. They have not. They should not be pushed." Vilren raised one of his many arms and silence fell. "Enough. This council has heard your warning, Ambassador Kim. We find it unconvincing. The Vashir Empire has the full support of this council in their police action against human expansion. You have been in violation of several galactic treaties regarding expansion speed and military buildup. The Vashir will restore order to the border regions. This matter is closed." Taeho felt something break inside him, not his spirit but his last hope for peace. He looked around the chamber at all the species who thought themselves superior. He saw their confidence, their certainty, their pride. Then I have one final statement, Taiho said quietly. The chamber grew silent, surprised by his tone. You judge us by our technology. You look at our ships and see inferior designs. You look at our weapons and see primitive tools. But you make a mistake. You judge us by what we have built. We judge ourselves by what we can endure. You will learn the difference between these two measurements. And when you do, I hope some of you survive to remember this moment. He turned and walked toward the exit. Yuna followed him. Behind them, the laughter continued. Elder Cormeth watched them leave. He had seen something in the human ambassador's eyes that troubled him deeply. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was certainty. The old reptilian had lived for 4 centuries and had witnessed many wars. He recognized that look. It was the look of someone who had already accepted what was coming and was prepared to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. As the council chamber doors closed behind the humans, Cormeth accessed his personal database. He pulled up information about human history, the wars, the genocides, the weapons of unthinkable destruction. He read about something called the Cold War, where humans built enough nuclear weapons to destroy their own planet dozens of times over. He read about trench warfare, about suicide attacks, about entire populations mobilizing for total war. He tried to share this information with Vilren, but the magistrate waved him away. Your concerns are noted, Elder, but groundless. The Vashir will have this situation resolved within a standard month. The humans will learn their place in the Galactic Order. Cormeth said nothing more. He had done what he could. He returned to his seat and began preparing reports for his own government. They at least would listen. They would prepare. They would not make the same mistake as this council. Above them all, beyond the crystal walls of the chamber, human ships were already moving. Yuna had sent the signal before they even arrived at the council. Earth had not waited for permission. Earth had not hoped for intervention. Earth was already preparing for war. The galaxy was about to learn a terrible lesson about the species it had dismissed as primitive. And by the time the lesson was over, the map of known space would never look the same again. Fleet Admiral Jiwan Nam stood in the war room deep beneath the surface of Earth. Around her, holographic displays showed every human ship, every colony, every resource in space. She had spent 30 years in the military, fighting pirates and mediating disputes. She had never expected to command a war like this. Show me the losses again, she ordered. The display changed. 12 colonies attacked, 7 completely destroyed, 5 partially evacuated. Total casualties estimated at 200,000 civilians and 15,000 military personnel. Ships lost 23. The list went on. Admiral, her aide said carefully, the civilian government is asking when we can negotiate a ceasefire. Jiwan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Negotiate? Did the Vashir negotiate before they slaughtered our people? No, we tried peace. Ambassador Teho tried to warn them. They laughed at us. She turned to face her staff. Activate the total war protocol. Silence fell over the room. Everyone knew what that meant. Admiral, someone protested. That protocol converts every factory, every resource, every civilian industry to military production. The economic impact will be... The economic impact of extinction is worse, Jiwan cut him off. Do it. And send a message to all human colonies, come home or prepare to fight. There is no middle ground anymore. Across Earth, the transformation began. Car factories started building military vehicles. Electronics manufacturers switched to producing weapon systems. Universities focused all research on military applications. Every able-bodied adult received basic combat training. It was not optional. Dr. Minji Huang worked in a laboratory that had previously studied peaceful energy solutions. Now she studied captured Vashir technology, looking for weaknesses. She had not slept in 3 days. Their shields are impressive, she muttered to her assistant. They create a field that stops or absorbs incoming energy. Very sophisticated. So we cannot beat them? Minji smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. I did not say that. Their shields stop energy weapons and explosives. But what about solid projectiles? What about good old-fashioned kinetic weapons? She ran simulations on her computer. A metal rod moving at significant speed hitting the shields. The shields would slow it down, drain it of energy, but could they stop it completely? We need to test this, she said. Contact Admiral Nam. Tell her I have an idea. In orbit, construction crews worked 24 hours a day building new ships. These were not elegant vessels like the Vashir used. They were ugly, brutal things designed for one purpose, carrying weapons into battle. Humanity did not have time for art. They only had time for war. Sergeant Dae-hyun Song gathered his special operations team on a transport ship. They were heading to Vashir-occupied territory for a mission that would be considered a war crime by galactic standards. "Listen up," Dae-hyun told his squad of 30 soldiers. "The Vashir have taken over the mining colony at Kepler 442. They are using our equipment and facilities. Our job is to make sure they never use it again." "Sabotage?" one soldier asked. "Worse, we are going to poison the entire operation, contaminate the ore, corrupt the computer systems, and leave behind some surprises for anyone who tries to repair it. The Vashir think war has rules. We are going to teach them different." The operation took 6 days. Dae-hyun's team infiltrated the colony using captured Vashir equipment. They moved like ghosts, avoiding detection. When they were done, every computer had a virus, every processed mineral was contaminated, and the main reactor had a delayed overload programmed for 3 weeks later. They left without being detected. The Vashir would not discover what had been done until it was too late. Back on Earth, Admiral Ji-won received reports from across human space. Attacks on Vashir supply lines, ambushes using tactics the aliens had never seen, human ships pretending to retreat, then turning around for suicide runs, colonists rigging their own stations with explosives rather than surrender. The Vashir were starting to panic. War Marshal Drextil sent increasingly desperate messages to the Galactic Council. "The humans fight without honor. They use biological weapons. They ram our ships. They booby-trap everything. We need reinforcements." The Council sent him 10 more ships and a message. "Finish this quickly. The situation is becoming politically complicated." Drextil wanted to scream at them. Did they not understand? These humans were not fighting a political war. They were fighting for extinction or victory. There was no middle ground. A month into the war, Dr. Minji's new weapon was ready. It was called a railgun, an old concept that humanity had abandoned because energy weapons seemed more advanced. But Minji had made improvements. The railgun fired solid slugs at a significant fraction of light speed. The slugs were made of depleted uranium, incredibly dense. The first test happened in the Battle of Proxima. A Vashir battle group encountered 3 human ships equipped with the new weapons. The Vashir activated their shields, confident in their protection. The railgun slugs hit the shields at tremendous speed. The shields slowed them down, drained their energy, but could not stop them completely. The slugs punched through and tore into the Vashir ships like paper. Metal screamed. Atmosphere vented. The Vashir had never experienced anything like it. 2 Vashir destroyers were destroyed in the first volley. The third retreated, broadcasting warnings about the new human weapons. Admiral Ji-won watched the battle reports with grim satisfaction. Finally, something that works. Retrofit every ship with railguns. I want them deployed within a month. But she was not satisfied with just evening the odds. She wanted to win. And winning for humanity meant complete victory. She authorized the use of nuclear weapons. The Galactic Council had banned nuclear weapons 3,000 years ago. They were considered barbaric, too destructive, too indiscriminate. But humanity had never signed that ban. Humanity had kept thousands of nuclear warheads in storage just in case. Now just in case had arrived. The first nuclear missile hit a Vashir space station. The explosion was like a miniature sun, bright enough to see from planets away. The radiation spread through space, contaminating everything in the area. The Vashir could not believe what they were seeing. "They used atomics," Drextil shouted at the council. "They violated the nuclear ban treaty." "They never signed it," Elder Cormeth reminded him quietly. "I tried to warn you. I told you they would use any weapon available." High Magistrate Vilren finally showed concern. "How many nuclear weapons do the humans possess?" Cormeth checked his database. According to their own records, approximately 7,000 warheads in active stockpile. Another 20,000 in reserve storage. The council chamber fell silent. 7,000. That was more than most species had ever built in their entire history. Vilren made a decision. "Contact the humans. Offer negotiations. We will force the Vashir to make reparations." But when the message reached Earth, Admiral Ji-won deleted it without responding. She had sent her own message to the Vashir. Surrender or die. 3 months into the war, humanity had lost 40% of its space infrastructure, but had destroyed 60% of the Vashir fleet. The ratio was unsustainable for the aliens. They were supposed to win quickly. Instead, they were slowly being ground down. Sergeant Daehyun and his team conducted over 50 sabotage missions. Each one made the Vashir more paranoid, more afraid. They stopped trusting their own equipment. They stopped occupying human territory because they knew it was all trapped. Dr. Minji developed more weapons. Biological agents that targeted Vashir physiology, computer viruses designed to corrupt their navigation systems, psychological warfare broadcasts that played on their fears. Humanity was fighting dirty, fighting mean, fighting with every trick learned from thousands of years of warfare. The Vashir Empire, which had never lost a war, was learning what it meant to fight a species that had never known peace. Admiral Jiwon looked at the latest casualty reports. More humans dead, more families destroyed. She felt the weight of every death. But she did not let it slow her down. She could not. "How long until we are ready for the offensive?" she asked. 2 months, Admiral. We will have enough ships to push into Vashir space. "Make it 1 month, Jiwon ordered. We are not defending anymore. We are attacking. We are going to make them feel what we felt. We are going to burn their colonies like they burned ours." Her staff exchanged worried looks. This was not defensive warfare. This was revenge, but nobody argued. They had all lost someone in the attacks. They all wanted the Vashir to suffer. The galaxy was about to learn a terrible truth about humanity. They were very good at war. Captain Hyunwoo Shin stood on the bridge of the Retribution, humanity's first true dreadnought. The ship was massive, built from salvaged Vashir technology and human ingenuity. It carried 50 railguns, 30 nuclear missile tubes, and a crew of 3,000. It was not beautiful, but it was deadly. "All ships report ready, Captain," his weapons officer reported. Hyunwoo looked at the fleet around him, 40 human warships all heading toward Vashir space. This was not a defensive fleet. This was an invasion force. "Set course for the Vashir border colonies. Maximum speed. It is time they learned what it feels like." 8 months had passed since the war began. 8 months of death and destruction. But the tide had turned. Humanity had lost half its space colonies, but the Vashir Empire had lost 2/3 of its military fleet. The mathematics of total war favored humanity because humans were willing to sacrifice everything. The first target was a Vashir colony called Reshnar. It was a peaceful mining world, home to 3 million Vashir civilians. They had never experienced war. Their planet had not seen conflict in 1,000 years. That peace ended when the Retribution entered orbit. Hyunwoo sent a message to the surface. "This is Captain Hyunwoo Shin of the Human Defense Fleet. You have 4 hours to evacuate this planet. After that, we will commence bombardment. This is your only warning." On the surface, panic erupted. The Vashir civilians had heard stories about human brutality, but they had not believed them. Now human warships filled their sky, and they knew the stories were true. The evacuation was chaos. Ships launched in every direction, overloaded with refugees. Some crashed. Many were left behind. The Vashir had never prepared for this because they had never needed to. 4 hours passed. Hyunwoo kept his word. The bombardment began. Railgun slugs fell like rain. Nuclear missiles turned military installations into glass. Within an hour, the colony was destroyed. The few Vashir who remained sent desperate messages begging for mercy. Hyunwoo felt sick, but he did not stop the attack. "They showed no mercy to New Seoul," he said quietly. "They showed no mercy to any of our colonies. Why should we show mercy to them?" His crew had no answer. They simply followed orders. Back at the Galactic Council, High Magistrate Vilren watched footage of the destruction. His mandibles trembled. "They are monsters. They are slaughtering civilians." Elder Cormeth's old eyes were sad. "No, Magistrate. They are doing exactly what the Vashir did to them. They are reflecting our cruelty back at us. We created these monsters when we ignored their warnings. We must stop this war," Vilren declared. "Both sides must cease hostilities immediately." Ambassador Taiho Kim had resigned months ago, disgusted by the brutality on both sides. In his place was Counselor Sora An, a woman with cold eyes and a colder heart. "The Galactic Council demands an immediate ceasefire," Vilren told her. Sora smiled. It was not a kind smile. "No, you cannot refuse. The Council has authority." "The Council has no authority over humanity," Sora interrupted. "You had your chance to help us. You chose to support our enemy. Now you will watch as we finish this war our way. We will accept nothing less than complete Vashir surrender. You are asking for genocide. We are asking for justice. The Vashir started this war. We will end it. If you try to interfere, we will consider it an act of war against humanity. Do you really want to find out what happens then? The threat hung in the air. The Council had seen what humanity did to its enemies. None of them wanted to become targets. Vilren tried another approach. He contacted War Marshal Drextil directly. You must surrender. Your empire cannot win this war. Drextil's voice was broken. Surrender. To those savages? They use weapons banned by all civilized species. They ram our ships. They poison our supplies. They broadcast our defeats to humiliate us. Even if I wanted to surrender, my government will not allow it. We are Vashir. We do not lose wars. Then you will lose your species, Vilren said bluntly. 3 weeks later, the humans launched their largest offensive yet. 50 ships attacked the Vashir home system. The battle lasted 6 days. When it was over, the Vashir home fleet was destroyed. Their orbital defenses were rubble and their homeworld was blockaded. Admiral Jiwan sent a message to the Vashir government. You have 48 hours to surrender. Disarm your remaining military forces. Pay reparations for the colonies you destroyed. Submit to human oversight of your military for the next 50 years, or we will bombard your homeworld. The Vashir government debated for 30 hours. Their military was gone. Their allies had abandoned them. The Galactic Council was paralyzed with fear. They had no choice. They surrendered. War Marshal Drextil refused to accept the surrender. He took his last battleship and went to make a final stand. He found a human supply convoy and attacked, destroying 2 cargo ships before the escorts could respond. Captain Hyunwoo's retribution arrived an hour later. The battle was short and brutal. Drextil's ship was torn apart by railgun fire. The War Marshal died when his bridge decompressed. His last transmission was heard across the galaxy. We should have listened to the warnings. The war officially ended after 14 months. The cost was staggering. Humanity had lost 300 billion credits in infrastructure, 500,000 military personnel, and 200,000 civilians. 34 colonies were damaged or destroyed. The Vashir Empire lost 90% of its military fleet, 40 colonies, and its status as a galactic power. They would spend the next century paying reparations and living under human military oversight. But the true cost was measured in other ways. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of. They had seen the nuclear weapons, the biological warfare, the ruthless tactics. They had seen a species willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Every species sent representatives. They had one topic to discuss: what to do about humanity. High Magistrate Vilren stood before the assembly, his pride finally broken. I was wrong. We were all wrong. We dismissed humanity as primitives. We thought their lack of advanced technology made them weak. We forgot that technology is not the only form of power. Determination is power. Ruthlessness is power. The willingness to sacrifice everything is power. He paused, looking at the gathered delegates. I propose we grant humanity full voting rights on this council. I propose we give them equal status with all other species. Not because we want to, but because we must. Because if we make them our enemies again, we might not survive. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was granted full council status with all rights and privileges. It was the first time in Galactic Council history that a species achieved such status, through military force rather than cultural or technological advancement. Elder Cormeth met with Counselor Sora after the vote. You won your war, he said. You proved you could destroy your enemies. Now comes the harder part. What do you mean? Now you must prove you can make peace. The galaxy fears you. Some species want to attack you before you become stronger. Others want to worship you as warriors. Neither response is healthy. You must show them that humanity can be peaceful when given respect. Sora considered his words carefully. We never wanted war. We wanted to explore, to build, to learn. The Vashir forced our hand, I know. I tried to tell them. But fear makes people irrational. Cormeth's eyes were ancient and sad. I have one warning for you, Counselor. Be careful that you do not become what the Vashir were. They were once a peaceful species. Then they won too many wars. They became arrogant. They believed they were superior. And that arrogance led to their destruction. Are you saying we will become like them? I am saying that power corrupts. You have proven you can destroy. Now prove you can create. Prove that humanity fights only when necessary, not because you enjoy it. That is the real test, Sora nodded slowly. I will consider your words, Elder. That night she sent a message to Admiral Jiwan, ordering the military to begin standing down. The war was over. It was time to rebuild. But across human space the celebrations were muted. Yes, they had won. Yes, they had proven themselves. But the cost had been terrible. Every human knew someone who had died. Every family had lost someone. And deep down, they all knew the truth. They had become exactly what they needed to become to survive. The question now was whether they could become something better. Premier Rena Beck stood before the Galactic Council, the first human to address them as an equal member. She was 50 years old, her hair streaked with gray from the stress of the past 2 years. She had been a teacher before the war. Now she was the leader of Earth's civilian government, chosen specifically because she was not a soldier. The galaxy needed to see that humans could be more than warriors. Honored members of the Council, she began, I stand before you not with pride but with sorrow. The war between humanity and the Vashir Empire cost millions of lives on both sides. It changed the balance of power in this galaxy. It changed how you see us and how we see ourselves. The chamber was silent. Every delegate watched her carefully. We did not want this war. Ambassador Taeho Kim came before you and begged for help. Elder Kormeth warned you about the consequences of ignoring us. But pride drowned out common sense. The Vashir believed they were superior. The Council believed humanity was primitive, and those beliefs led to catastrophe. High Magistrate Vilren lowered his head. The shame of that decision would follow him forever. But, Rena continued, we are not without fault. Yes, we defended ourselves. Yes, we fought with everything we had. But we also became something dark in that fight. We used weapons that should never be used. We destroyed colonies. We became what we needed to become to survive, and that transformation cost us our innocence. She paused, letting her words sink in. Today, I propose a new path forward. Humanity will maintain a strong military. We will never again be in a position where we can be threatened with impunity, but we will also commit ourselves to peace. We will share our technology with species that treat us with respect. We will help rebuild what was destroyed, and we will work to ensure that no other species has to make the choice we made, fight or die. The chamber remained quiet. Then Elder Kormeth stood, his ancient body moving slowly. Premier Beck speaks with wisdom beyond her years. I support her proposal. The galaxy needs humanity's strength, but it also needs humanity's conscience. One by one, other delegates stood in agreement. Even Vilren eventually rose, though his mandibles clicked with reluctance. The Galactic Council passed a resolution that day. It was called the Humanity Protocols. The rules were simple. Any species that engaged humanity in warfare would be considered hostile by the entire Council. Trade sanctions would be automatic. Military support would be withdrawn. Humanity had earned the right to exist without constant threat, but there were conditions. Humanity agreed to destroy 70% of its nuclear arsenal. They agreed to limit the use of biological weapons. They agreed to international observers monitoring their military development. It was not trust. It was détente. But it was better than war. Fleet Admiral Jiwan Nam attended the signing ceremony in her military uniform. She was retiring after 40 years of service, having led humanity through its darkest hour. As she watched Premier Rena sign the agreements, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Do you think it will last? Someone asked her. Jiwan considered the question carefully. Peace, maybe. Respect? Definitely. They will never again dismiss us as primitives. They have seen what we are capable of. Now they will see what we choose to do with that capability. Across the galaxy, the changes were already visible. Dr. Minji Huang returned to peaceful energy research, but her military innovations had changed warfare forever. Other species began developing railguns and kinetic weapons. The galactic arms race had begun, but it was an arms race that respected humanity's capabilities. Sergeant Daehyun Song and his special operations team became instructors, teaching defensive tactics to species who requested help. Turns out, many smaller civilizations wanted to know how humanity had beaten a superior force. Daehyun taught them, but he also warned them. These tactics work because we were desperate. Use them only when you have no other choice. Captain Hyun Woo Shin took command of the new human embassy ship, a vessel designed for diplomacy rather than war. His crew included former soldiers who wanted to help rebuild what they had destroyed. They traveled to damaged Vashir colonies and assisted with reconstruction. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. The Vashir Empire itself was unrecognizable. Their once mighty military was reduced to a defensive force. Their economy was crippled by reparations. Their pride was shattered. But slowly they began to rebuild. And some Vashir, particularly the younger generation, began to see humanity differently. One young Vashir named Krishal studied at a human university. He wanted to understand the species that had defeated his people. What he found surprised him. Humans were not naturally violent. They valued art, music, family. They loved their children and mourned their dead. They were not so different from his own people. "Why did you fight so hard?" he asked his human roommate. The human thought about it. "Because we had no choice. Your empire gave us two options, surrender or fight. We chose to fight, and once we chose, we committed completely. That is the human way. We do not do things halfway." Kreshal wrote a paper about humanity's warrior culture. It became required reading in Vashir military academies. A lesson in what happens when you underestimate your enemy. Ambassador Junho Lee was young for a diplomat. Only 35, but he had grown up during the war. He lost his brother in the Battle of Proxima. He knew both the cost of war and the necessity of peace. He met with Elder Cormeth regularly, learning from the ancient reptilian's wisdom. "Why did you try to warn the council?" Yunyo asked one day. "You knew they would not listen." Cormeth's eyes were distant. "Because it was right. Because silence makes you complicit. I could not stop the war, but I could at least say that someone tried. Someone saw the truth and spoke it. Do you think humanity will abuse its power? Some humans will try. Some always do. But I have faith in your species. You have shown you can be ruthless when necessary. Now you must show you can be merciful when possible. That is the harder path, but the more important one." Junho took those words to heart. When negotiating treaties with other species, he was fair but firm. He did not let anyone take advantage of humanity, but he also did not let humanity become a bully. Back on Earth, memorials were erected for the fallen. The largest was at the ruins of New Sol Colony, rebuilt as a monument rather than a settlement. Administrator Hana Lee, who survived the evacuation, returned to dedicate it. The memorial wall listed every human who died in the war. 500,000 names, each one representing a life cut short. At the base of the wall, an inscription read, "They heard our warnings. Pride drowned out their common sense. May we never forget this lesson from either side." Hana stood before the wall and cried. She cried for Captain Minho Choi and the crew of the Indomitable. She cried for the civilians who did not escape. She cried for the future that could have been, if only peace had been chosen, but she also felt hope. Because humanity had survived, they had proven they could fight when necessary. Now they had to prove they could build when possible. Premier Rena visited the memorial a year after the war ended. She gave a speech to the gathered crowd. "We won this war," she said, "but victory does not feel the way we thought it would. We proved we are strong. We proved we can defend ourselves. But we also learned the cost of that strength. Every name on this wall is a reminder that war is not glorious. It is not exciting. It is not something to celebrate. It is something to endure, to survive, and to prevent." She looked out at the crowd, at the humans who had fought and bled and sacrificed. "So I make this promise to all of you, and to those who cannot hear me. We will use our strength wisely. We will help others rather than conquer them. We will remember that our weapons exist to prevent war, not to start it. And we will make sure that the galaxy never again dismisses humanity as primitive. Because we are not primitive. We are simply pragmatic. We do what must be done, and now what must be done is peace." The crowd was silent for a moment. Then someone began to clap. Then another. Soon the entire gathering was applauding, not for victory but for survival, not for war but for the promise of peace. High above Earth in the Galactic Council chambers, a new era was beginning. Humanity had earned its place not through technology or culture but through sheer determination. They had shown the galaxy that primitive did not mean weak, that new did not mean inferior, that warnings should never be ignored. Elder Cormeth watched from his seat as Premier Rena negotiated a trade agreement with a species that had once feared humanity. She was patient, respectful, but she did not back down when the terms were unfair. She embodied the balance humanity needed, strong enough to demand respect, wise enough to seek peace. Will they remember the lesson? Another delegate asked Cormeth. The ancient reptilian considered the question. Some will, some will not. That is the nature of all species. But humanity has given the galaxy something valuable. A reminder that pride and arrogance have consequences. That dismissing others based on prejudice leads to disaster. That warnings exist for a reason. And if someone else makes the same mistake? Cormeth looked at the human ships orbiting the council station. They were still armed. They were still ready. Humanity had not forgotten the lessons either. Then they will learn the same way the Vashir learned, he said quietly. The hard way. The colony of New Sol hung in orbit around a blue-green planet that humans had spent 30 years terraforming. Administrator Hana Lee stood in the observation deck, watching cargo ships move between the surface and the orbital stations. Everything looked peaceful. Everything looked normal. She knew it would not last. Her communicator buzzed. It was Captain Minho Choi from the defense ship Indomitable. His voice was tense. Administrator, we have multiple contacts entering the system. Very large signatures. Moving fast. Hana's stomach dropped. How long? 90 minutes until they reach the colony. Maybe less. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. She had prepared for this. They all had. Begin evacuation protocol 7. Get everyone to the shelters. Prioritize children and medical patients. Understood. And Administrator? It looks like at least 20 ships. We count one of them as a dreadnought class. We are very outgunned. Do what you can, Captain. Buy us time. Hana ran to the emergency command center. Around her, alarms began to sound. People moved quickly but without panic. They had drilled for this scenario every month for the past year. Ever since the tensions with the Vashir Empire had begun. On the Indomitable, Captain Minho Choi studied the tactical display. His ship was 40 years old and had been scheduled for decommission before the crisis began. Now it was one of only 3 military vessels in the entire system. The other 2 were even smaller than his ship. Lieutenant Suji Kang worked at the weapons station, her fingers moving across controls. Captain, I recommend we use the asteroid field at Sector 7. We cannot fight them head-on, but we can slow them down. Minho nodded. Suji was young, only 25, but she was brilliant. She saw patterns others missed. Make it so. Full speed to the asteroids. Alert the other ships to follow our lead. The Vashir fleet approached like a storm. Their ships were massive, covered in weapons and shields that shimmered with energy. War Marshal Drextil stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human colony grow larger on his screens. This would be his easiest victory yet. Marshal, his weapons officer reported, 3 small vessels are moving to intercept. Analysis shows they are outdated models, barely capable of faster-than-light travel. Drextil made a gesture of dismissal. Destroy them quickly. Then begin bombardment of the orbital stations. The Council wants this matter resolved before it becomes complicated. The first engagement happened near the asteroid field. The Indomitable and its 2 companion ships opened fire with everything they had. Missiles streaked across space. Energy beams lit up the darkness. For a few moments, it looked almost like a fair fight. Then the Vashir shields activated. The human weapons hit the energy barriers and simply stopped. None of them penetrated. None of them caused damage. Shields are too strong, Suji reported, her voice frustrated. Our weapons are not getting through. Then we do not aim at the shields, Minho said. He steered the Indomitable directly toward an asteroid the size of a building. All ships, pattern Gamma. Use the rocks as weapons. The Vashir officer laughed when he saw what the humans were doing. They are hiding behind asteroids. How primitive. But Drextil was not laughing. He watched as the human ship used its thrusters to push a massive asteroid directly into the path of one of his destroyers. The asteroid hit the shields and stopped, but the impact drained energy. Then another asteroid hit. Then another. Clever, Drextil admitted, but futile. All ships spread out. Destroy those asteroids before the humans can use them. The battle became a deadly game of cat and mouse. The human ships darted between rocks, pushing them, pulling them, creating a minefield of debris. They could not hurt the Vashir ships directly, but they could slow them down. They could make them use more energy. They could buy time. But time was running out. One of the human escort ships took a direct hit from a plasma cannon. The ship's hull split open like paper. Atmosphere and bodies spilled into space. The second escort lasted only minutes longer. Now only the Indomitable remained. Minho knew his ship was finished. But he also knew his duty. Suji, how long until the evacuation shuttles reach minimum safe distance? 40 minutes, Captain. Then we give them 40 minutes. He looked at his crew. Young faces, old faces, all looking at him with trust. I will not order any of you to stay. Anyone who wants to take an escape pod, do so now. I will not think less of you. Nobody moved. Very well, Minho said, pride filling his voice. Then let us show these bastards what humans do when cornered. The Indomitable charged directly at the Vashir dreadnought. Every weapon firing, engines pushed beyond safety limits, the old ship screamed through space like a missile. The Vashir fleet watched in confusion. What was the human doing? Drexel suddenly understood. It means to ram us. All weapons, destroy that ship! Dozens of plasma beams converged on the Indomitable. The shields failed immediately. The hull began to melt. But Minho kept the engines at full power. The ship was dying, but it was still moving forward. At the last moment, Minho redirected course slightly. The Indomitable did not hit the dreadnought. Instead, it plowed into a Vashir cruiser, its reactor already overloading. The explosion lit up the entire asteroid field. The cruiser was destroyed instantly. The dreadnought took heavy damage from the blast wave. 2 nearby destroyers lost power. In the burning wreckage, there were no survivors from the Indomitable. On the colony, Hana watched the explosion through telescopes. Tears ran down her face, but she did not stop working. Minho had bought them time. She would not waste it. All shuttles away, her assistant reported. We managed to evacuate 70% of the population. 70%. That meant 30% were still here. Thousands of people who could not be saved. Hana accessed the colony's central computer. She began entering commands, her hands shaking. If the Vashir wanted this colony, they would get it. But they would get nothing useful. Throughout the orbital station, explosives activated. Fuel reserves were vented into space. Computer cores were wiped. Manufacturing facilities self-destructed. Everything humanity had built over 30 years was systematically destroyed. The Vashir fleet arrived to find a burning shell. Drexel stood on his damaged bridge and stared at the destruction. The humans had destroyed their own colony rather than let it be captured. Marshall, his communications officer, said quietly, "We are receiving a message from Earth. It is just 2 words. What does it say?" No surrender. Drexel felt something he had not felt in his 300 years of military service. Not fear exactly, but a cold recognition. The Galactic Council had said this would be over in weeks. They had said the humans would see reason. They had said this would be simple. But the humans had just killed themselves rather than give up. They had destroyed their own property. They had sacrificed a military ship to damage his fleet. This was not how civilized species fought wars. He sent a message to the Council. Initial resistance stronger than anticipated. Estimate 4 to 6 weeks for complete pacification. He had no idea how wrong he was. The humans were not fighting to win battles. They were fighting to survive. And survival for humanity meant something very different than it did for the rest of the galaxy. In the escape shuttles, Hana held a crying child and watched New Soul burn. She whispered a promise to herself, to the child, to everyone who had died. We will make them pay. We will make them pay for every single one. Behind her, the other survivors were already planning. Not surrender, not retreat, revenge.